I've not watched Volume 7 of RWBY yet, if only because Rooster Teeth shows in general are best watched all in one sitting and not once a week as they come out. I have seen the first episode, though, on Pornhub, while drunk, and my only takeaway is, holy shit, Penny is adorable. Here's my prediction for Volume 7. They're gonna fuck up multiple things in the finale, and when the final boss gets defeated, the writers will throw up their hands and say, they're done, and wrap up everything as cleanly and contrived as possible because Slutnesh forbid anything that happens in one season have consequences in the next. Also, the finale will have one specific thing that causes everyone to have a massive freakout and start burning Rooster Teeth in effigy, or more specifically Miles Luna, even though there's a 99% chance that whatever they're losing their shit over is actually a complete and total fucking misinterpretation on their part. I could make whole entire content about RWBY and its failings, but I'm reluctant because I don't want to be associated with the rest of its audience. I don't even really care about RWBY. At least I'm not emotionally invested, especially after the shit show that was Volume 5, but I am fascinated by it. I mean, it really is just a shame. It could have been something. I personally wanted RWBY to be the next Toho project, a neat and stylish little anime-esque series that every once in a while expands itself with a new installment, but has an abundance of fan content to enjoy in the meanwhile. But then everything just lined up right and it's been going to shit ever since. It's poetically morbid, actually. It borrows its aesthetic from Japanese media and uses the number 4 prominently as a motif, which in Japan is associated with death and misfortune, and look what happened. But honestly, nothing about the show itself upsets or even surprises me anymore. It's the fucking audience that frustrates me, and if there's one thing that proves just how horrible RWBY is, that would be the people who watch it. The people who follow RWBY, watching it all the time and never stop talking about it, are some of the most despicable people. They act like children, are arrogant as all hell, think they're better than others, fail at basic logic, make fallacious arguments, and refuse to understand the importance of pointing out flaws so that they can be fixed, and respond to anyone trying to point it out to them with mockery and character attacks. The worst part is that since their bullshit appeals to the bias of others like them, their entire circle is a giant fucking echo chamber. These people are known as RWBYtubers, aka RWBY critics, and they are a fucking cancer. I mean, oh yeah, the fucking fandom sucks too. To say they're a bunch of shitheads is putting it mildly, but at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with just liking a cartoon, even if it is a shipping justice warrior pandering piece of shit with all the integrity of a house of cards. Anyone outside of both circles can see from miles away that the dipshits bashing the show on YouTube are equally belligerent and stupid as the fanatics, which isn't a surprise, because people who attack toxic fandoms are equally toxic, if not more so, and always have been. There's a notable difference between an in-group who act up because they're passionate about a fucking work of fiction, and a mainstream crowd who consciously decide that it's acceptable and even justified to abuse and humiliate others based on how they internally characterize them. RWBY critics are blind to it, unfortunately, not only because none of them have a single shred of self-awareness among them, something that is crucial for criticism, by the way, but mostly because RWBY's entire goddamn community is a political situation, and facts don't matter in politics. Factions do. In the minds of critics and those who support them, the fact that they say anything at all automatically makes everything they say correct, and anyone who begs to differ is just a salty fanboy who doesn't understand the value of criticism. Which is hilarious, because if you pay attention, you'll notice these idiots constantly misinterpret the show and believe in and obsess over the dumbest shit. It's so common, I'm starting to think the show itself is a multiverse wormhole, and everybody who watches it are viewing slightly different variations of the same set of events. There are as many glaring problems in the videos of RWBYtubers as there are in the show, and they have just as many character flaws as the cast and crew. But because they just arbitrarily declare that anyone who disagrees with them is just a fanboy who doesn't acknowledge the flaws, their followers are too distracted making fun of them to notice that they themselves are refusing to acknowledge flaws. As a result, the show itself is highly misconstrued, to the point that people talking about it don't even seem to be paying attention to what's happening on screen anymore, and people who watch their videos don't know any better because they never actually watch it themselves. They just believe what they're told. My favorite example of this phenomenon is the Tai Yang is the Cowardly Lion thing, which was never actually a thing. It was just baseless speculation, a fan theory at best. There's even evidence to go against it, but you get one or two morons here or there who hear about it in passing and assume that it's official, and then complain when it doesn't happen, which it couldn't because it was never a thing and never could have been. But because they whine about it, others conform to the groupthink and believe it as well. The miasma of misinformation and the dust cloud of dissonance with the RWBY community is so thick that I'm not even sure how Monty died anymore. I've heard at least 4 different versions of the story. I am honestly convinced that I am the only person who watches RWBY who has any goddamn perspective of anything anymore. And if I'm not, then at least I'm the only one whose intentions aren't questionable. My real problem is that the one-sidedness of the fans versus critics narrative enables nefarious individuals to take advantage of the situation. If you're smart enough to know that RWBY is a bad show, then you're also smart enough to know it's an easy target. That's why anyone acting like they're a storytelling genius because they can point out obvious mistakes in the show is just an armchair expert, and not everyone bashing RWBY is interested in seeing the show improve, or just expressing their opinions. Some of them are actively trying to get people humiliated and mistreated for their own amusement, and their followers have no idea they're being manipulated since they're being given exactly what they want. People they can feel good about picking on, because that's what toxic fandoms are, acceptable victims of toxic behavior. The best example of this specific flavor of bullshit I'm talking about comes from Just a Robot, or Just a Retard as I like to call him because I have nothing but contempt for pseudo-intellectuals. He made a video about RWBY, of course, and in it he didn't realize that John healing Weiss at the end of Volume 5 was his semblance. People corrected him about this naturally, and he proceeded to brush them all off with a bullshit non-argument, and then he went to Manga Common's video to sarcastically make fun of them, strawmanning them as just fanboys and not people merely trying to correct a simple honest mistake, assuming that it is an honest mistake. Here's his actual rebuttal. Yeah, they never said it was a semblance, and I think anyone with aura should be able to transfer it like that. Okay? First of all, they never said it was his semblance? There was an entire part of that scene, like 2 minutes long, where John clearly explained that it was his semblance and how it worked, and even if they never verbally said it was his semblance, it doesn't change the fact that the entire point of that scene was him unlocking it. And also, I think anyone with aura should be able to transfer it. Okay? I mean, it's cool that you think that, Just a Retard, but that's not an argument. Superman doesn't become immune to kryptonite just because you think he should be. He might as well be arguing, well, I think 2 plus 2 should equal 5. And I wouldn't put it past him to even try that, because his default response to anyone who doesn't agree with him is to literally act as though his opinion is fact. It's even suggested by how he titles his fucking videos. I'm not even certain he even realizes that reality doesn't conform to his thoughts. Let's face it. He just made his video because he knows YouTube vids about bad cartoons are fucking view magnets, and he could just paint any dissenters as members of their fandom in order to deflect valid criticism. ER made an entire channel out of doing it, and Easy Peasy, the fucking poster boy of YouTube pseudo-intellectuals, uses it as a crutch. YouTube vids about bad cartoons and their fans are bigger clickbait than reaction videos and top 10 lists. A lazy, easy way to get attention without giving a fuck about being genuine. It's painfully obvious that Just a Retard noticed other YouTubers pulling shit like this and mimic them for easy targets to mock, because RWBYtubers can just exploit "lol, fandoms are dumb" in order to whore for attention while influencing their supporters to engage in their own toxic behavior. RWBY fans and RWBY haters are exactly the same. They just don't see it because, just like in politics, the only thing that matters is the side they're on because they think that's what makes them right and good. Critics get shit wrong about the show all the damn time, and they make themselves look stupid as all hell in the process. But they don't care, because no one will notice, because they know as long as they act like they know what they're talking about, gullible sheep will flock to them and validate and defend them just because they say anything at all. No different from how RWBY fans will act like the show is a masterpiece just because an episode played. It's why they'll piss themselves laughing when a RWBY fan gets publicly humiliated and bullied on social media by one critic, but 2 seconds later will complain about misbehavior from the fandom without a single hint of irony. It's why they'll shit all over Miles Luna for being a pussy who can't handle people saying mean things about him on the internet, but they'll support an even bigger pussy having an even bigger shit fit when people criticize him. And they won't blink when he denies being a hypocrite for rejecting criticism by actively arguing that his own standard of "you have to deal with people giving you shit" doesn't apply to himself. In a video of which the entire purpose was villainizing the fandom because he was butthurt about being criticized and told everyone he was leaving the community because he didn't want to deal with people giving him shit. Literally no one batted an eyelash at this. This massive pussy produced more salt in one video than the fandom ever has and probably ever will, and the ass clowns who gleefully cheer about mining salt at every opportunity didn't even notice, because they were too busy believing his misrepresentation and vitriol on the sheer basis of fanboys are the worst. And by the way, cheering about mining salt is literally admitting that you are deriving pleasure from other people having their feelings hurt. That is textbook bullying. My point is, if this kind of behavior is acceptable to you, shut the fuck up about the fandom. Oh sure, they'll never directly incite their followers to harass people. That's only because they know they'll never get away with it. Just the same, if they were challenged on it, they could just publicly state that they don't endorse abusive behavior in order to save face and avoid culpability, despite what their actual behavior otherwise suggests. I know how deniability works. It's why I don't name or directly accuse anyone who actually does abuse their detractors or encourage it through their actions. And it wouldn't matter anyways, because they just honestly can't see how full of shit they are. Because no one who takes sides in arguments can ever see how full of shit they are. It's why they preach about criticism as if it was something they believe their whole lives, when you can tell from their comments that they are just making that shit up on the spot. Even the word criticism is just a fucking buzzword the way they use it. They don't even actually believe criticism is important, they're just parroting rhetoric. It's why critics themselves ignore, deflect, or even block people who criticize them, or use their Twitter following to publicly humiliate them. Just the same, they'll dismiss perfectly valid arguments against them by claiming that the other speaker is a fanboy who won't listen. Because no one rejects valid criticism more than people who preach about how important criticism is. But that's a tangent for another time, if only because it's not specific to RWBY. They don't even know if the people they're disparaging are even really RWBY fans. They could just as easily be another critic. That's my case. I'm not a fan of RWBY, but I don't worship the words of RWBY critics either because they are literally retarded. They are always misinterpreting the show and committing logic fails. But they'll just declare me or anyone who disagrees with them to be a RWBY fan because they know that appeals to the groupthink of their followers and will distract them from noticing their mistakes because they have someone to mock for not acknowledging mistakes, as evidenced by them pointing out a mistake. It's what keeps them relevant. Similarly, ass-lickers will go to their comments and make declarative statements about, quote, RWBY fans, and everybody will just believe it because herder fandoms, and will be lost on them that 90% of these comments are equally true of them. These fuckers are so far up their own ass that they can't comprehend their own behavior is equally fucking insipid, is coming from the same place, and is often exactly the goddamn same in essence. Just look at the Adam Taurus fanboys, or TARDs, as I like to call them. Just like how Wasp shipped Bumblebee based solely on the fact that they went into the show expecting and hoping for a lesbian romance and latched onto the first same-sex pairing to have any precedent, Tard latched onto the idea of Adam being an anti-hero or some shit even though he never was and never could have been. Wasp mentally revised the show to convince themselves that Bumblebee is the only canon couple, despite Arcos and Renora existing, and Tards mentally revised the show to convince themselves that Adam never abused Blake, despite the fact that his defining scene has him stabbing Blake in the gut, threatening to slaughter her friends and family, and then making an example of it by mutilating her friend with the express purpose of causing her mental trauma. Wasp believe that only with Yake and Blaine looking up will the show have more representation, despite the show already having enough gay characters to make a Huntsman team. Tards believe that Adam cared about the faunus, which he does, but only because he's a supremacist, by his own admission. Not the sort of caring about the faunus that would put him in a gray area. Adam is not the Robin Hood of the faunus, he's the Magneto. Tards don't realize this because they alter their perspective of the show, no differently how Wasp will believe that Blake and Yang are soulmates even though they barely even qualify as just friends. And by the way, ranting and raving about Adam being a morally ambiguous anti-hero makes you sound exactly like the kind of 12-year-old edgelord Adam's voice actor sounds like, and if you glue the terms morally ambiguous and anti-hero together, you don't know what either of those mean. Wasp and Tards are exactly the same. They had wishful hopes about characters despite nothing on screen supporting their ideas in any way and refuse to acknowledge evidence against it because they just label their detractors something they think is evil so others will attack them. RWBY critics and their followers use the term RWBY fan the way Wasp used the term homophobe. Are you getting the fucking picture yet? Now admittedly, I hardly know or see anything about the fandom and how they behave, mainly because I don't give a shit about social media, forums, or anything that's just a venue for confirmation bias such as comment sections. But I don't have to. If I just assume that everything I hear or read about the fandom and their awful behavior is true, and assume it's twice as bad as that, doing a side-by-side comparison, I fail to see how the hate them is any better. Because RWBY critics and haters not only demonstrate the same traits as the fandom, if not worse versions of them, they also display the same fatal flaws as the show and its creators in their content. The fandom is everything wrong with RWBY. My Futanari-loving ass. The entire goddamn audience is a shitstorm. And just because you belong to a different faction doesn't mean you're not still an NPC. And RWBY critic followers are most definitely NPCs. Click on any random video that bashes RWBY or his fanbase, go to the comment section, and take a shot every time you see someone repeating the exact same statement. Now try not to get alcohol poisoning. Of course RWBY is a horrible show. It enables an overweight blowhard with all the handsome good looks of a child pornographer to amass an audience that cling to his every word despite his constant logic failures, terrible jokes, and transparent attempts at pretending to be clever, and expertise of screenwriting born out of the Dunning-Kruger effect. You don't have to be a fanboy to notice that people like Adel Akka, or however you say his name, are literally retarded, any more than you have to be a critic or hater to know that the show is written with Luna's undistilled ADD. Just the same, any moron whose observational skills wouldn't have caused him to walk into traffic as a child, as is the case for the average RWBY YouTuber, can figure out on their own that the floof autist is just deliberately acting up in every comedy he makes because he wants attention in order to compensate for his insecurities. Most likely social, possibly sexual. Just the same, it's not that hard to tell that Celtic Penis is a poser who only got into writing for the sake of pretending to be smart. Now seriously, pseudo-intellectuals on YouTube are transparent as shit if you know what to look for. And the fucksticks who worship money? Just as insipid as the shippers. They practically deify a man who made it perfectly clear that he never wanted to be placed on any pedestal like that, and with a straight face will believe that the real meaning of keep moving forward is cling to the past. Yet they believe it is other people who are disrespecting money, because they have enough sense not to overhype a man whose only real talent was animation first and everything else second. All because a former crew member was so smitten with money that he lost his grip on reality and convinced himself that every little brain fart that he had was part of a magnum opus vision for RWBY that he never actually possessed, and that any deviation from the glorious god OOMM's ideas must be out of malice and nothing else, and so secretly left his delusional ramblings in the ether of this community, which is certainly not helping the aforementioned miasma misinformation. That's a whole other bag of shit as well. Point is, the whole fucking audience is a mess. As much of a mess, if not more so, than the show itself and the company making it. The fandom is far from the only toxic element here, and the more you focus on them, the more you draw attention away from and therefore enable toxic elements elsewhere, and the more you villainize toxic communities, the more resentful they become and subsequently the worse they'll get. You get what you deserve. Critics and haters are just as misbehaved as the fans, tards and Monty-files are just as stupid as the shippers, and YouTubers are just as responsible for this mess as RWBY, and so is Monty too in a way. And if complaining about the show and its followers would have solved anything, we would have seen results by now. And don't think I don't respect where some of these people are coming from. If there's one thing I understand, it's perspectives. Some people were genuinely inspired to get into or back into art, storytelling, and whatnot because of Monty and RWBY. I'm one of them. Some people are disappointed and or upset, putting it mildly, that something that should have been fun and cool or at least half decently awesome turned into a dumpster fire fueled by pandering and merchandise. Again, same for me. And some people are just full of piss and vinegar about the whole situation and want to take it out on anyone they feel is part of the problem. And I am a kindred spirit on that. Just the same, I do think it's important that Rooster Teeth in general has as much breath down their neck as possible given the shit they've been up to. But that does not make everything you say a fact and does not make the way you treat others justified. You want to talk shit about RWBY, or Korra, or Steven Universe, or Rick and Morty, or whatever the fuck, go right ahead. Hell, save me a seat if you're inviting others. I'll bring Cheetos. But if you just want easy targets to take potshots at for a crowd of equally ill-behaved dipshits as the ones you are picking on, you are fake as shit and I can see right through you. Besides, RWBY was never about its magical storytelling to begin with. It was about encouraging fanon. You want to see something RWBY related that's actually cool? Go read a fanfic or a fan comic. There's plenty. Hell, 90% of the reason I have any interest in RWBY is just the porn. I personally don't even believe the show is even canon, and I'm positive I'm not alone in that. Why do you think people go apeshit over every single RWBY rewrite that gets proposed, even though literally every one of them is just as ill-conceived and misguided as the actual show? Because they're different, therefore they must be better, right? I mean, fuck it, the creators don't have a fucking clue what they're doing, so it's only natural everyone talking about the show be just as fucking blind, deaf, and dumb, regardless of whatever side they're on. They're a symptom. The root of RWBY's failures are that it was overhyped and underdeveloped. It tries to take itself seriously, but undermines itself at every turn, just like RWBYtubers, because it was shoddily built on a foundation of misguided creativity and sheer utter incompetence, because one quirky animator was just too damned excited to bring his brainchild into the world before he had finished gestating. There isn't any feedback that is going to fix that. And I mean, really? RWBY YouTubers? As if any one of them could ever measure up to the quality and intellect of... fuck, I don't know, Noggin? Yeah, Noggin, we'll go with him. After all, we are talking about people who constantly watch RWBY and are always making a big deal about it, and according to the internet, people who are obsessed with RWBY are all stupid and toxic and you should stay away from them. That's what the internet says, so it must be true. Safety and peace out.
Now listen, I know the two of you are very different from each other in a lot of ways, but you have to understand that as far as Grandpa's concerned, you're both pieces of shit. You're both equally mercurial, overly sensitive, clingy, hysterical bird brain homunculi. And I honestly can't even tell the two of you apart half the time because I don't go by height or age, I go by amount of pain in my ass, which makes you both identical.